let's go back to the hospital where the diagnosis is made. Let's go back to 2018, and I'm going to magic wand this situation. I'm going to give Metabolic Collective exactly what they want. I'm just going to say this is going to be options. So the doctor is going to present you with an option A, and the doctor is going to present you with an option B. And again, there's no way to know. You were there, but it's been a long time. You've learned a lot since then. But if you could try to take yourself back to that spot, and I'm just going to say, the doctor sits you down and says, okay, option A is this is going to get worse. He has the gene. Here's the pill. Come see me in 6 months. Or option B is you change everything you eat. You do the red lights. You do the saunas. You work on movement. You going through all these different steps of potential things that you could do on the Bredesen protocol, which we can talk about in a second. But it's all these different things, and maybe he'll have a chance to improve. What would you do being presented that information? Because on the one hand, it's like, well, this doesn't have very good prognosis, but like there's like nothing to do. I don't have to change anything. You're telling me I've got to completely change the way that I eat. Everything that you're describing now, wifey has to cook all the food and be this huge team 24/7. Like, how do you think you would process that if you were offered those two options?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think that me, you kind of said it, right? It's like door number one stinks, and unfortunately, door number one's the only thing that's being offered right now. Door number two, it's a lot of work and no guarantee. But we've got some really great research, and Dr. Bredesen's last randomized controlled trial just wrapped up, and it's in peer review right now. So it's not, like fully sealed yet, but so far we're hearing it's his best study yet. And every study since 2014 has just seen some tremendous results. So, but to be one of those outliers that are growing every day, it takes a lot of work. For me, going back, I would have said yes, but of course, it's my dad who's got to make the choice, right? And that goes back to, he agreed to do this, which I'm very grateful for. And there are those who will not agree. And I've heard that countless times where I get the call and somebody says, I read all of Bredesen's books and I'm doing it for myself for prevention. My dad is at mild cognitive impairment already or early Alzheimer's, and he won't put the Coca-Cola down, or he won't stop eating sugar, or he just doesn't want to do it. And I get it, because by that point it's very challenging. What I would say is, if I could wave a magic wand, standard of care would make everyone screen for what Dr. Bredesen calls the cognoscopy. We know that we got to do the colonoscopy at 50, but we start screening for the cognoscopy at 45. And we start to really test, where are we cognitively? And here are some labs that can kind of show us what's going on under the hood. And let's start working on that stuff now. And you and I, Casey, know that without making it too complicated, if we're in our mid 40s and we start optimizing our diet, our exercise, how we stress manage, our sleep, I mean, geez, what's not possible? We see it all the time. And you train people in this and you see it firsthand. So I wish more of that was going on at the neurologist's office, at the primary care provider. And someone like yourself is working hand in hand with these clinicians as a more wraparound, holistic approach to real health care, as opposed to managing sick care. So I kind of took a circuitous route. Hopefully that answers your question.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate that. And there's another thing in the story that I really don't want to pass up. You mentioned a 40% improvement in a particular score. I don't know that I really considered not only what a big change that is, but also what that practically actually looks like until I started getting into the work of Dr. Mary Newport. Of course,
Yes.
her
Yeah.
husband also diagnosed with an early onset Alzheimer's. He's got the famous pictures of drawing the clock
Yep.
that looks like an absolute disaster, and then a few time intervals later, after being on not even a ketogenic diet, but adding ketones to the diet, how much
Yeah.
improvement there was. When she said her husband improved, it wasn't just like, oh, he remembers more things. It's like, no, he's becoming himself again. He's telling jokes again. He's playing games with us again. So can you compare and contrast the dad that started with the terrible score and the dad that had the 40% improvement? Because I think we could miss that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, you're taking me back. So, and Dr. Mary Newport was an early hero of ours. My uncle had sent me um, her book before I even found Bredesen and kind of got me down that track. And her husband Steve's story is something that we worked on modeling. So the in fact, it's the same test that they had to do. It's the MoCA. There's the MMSE and the MoCA, the Montreal Cognitive Test. And when my dad started, he had trouble with the entire test. About a year and a half, he had jumped up his score 38%. But like, what did that look like? Because something's on paper, but like, what did that look like in life? Um, when he first started, he could really no longer drive. He could drive, but I mean, to get from point A to point B, that should be 10 minutes. It was going to take him like 30, right? Because he was going to take every left turn, right turn, because he'd forget where he'd be going, and then he'd get back on track. And so at that point, he really shouldn't be driving. Um, and he was muscling his way. So we're talking about my father's a brick and block mason. Okay. So we're talking about a guy who had to lift, heavy blocks and bricks and had to do it several stories up, climbing scaffolding, you know, uh, buckets of mortar. And he was trying to muscle his way back onto jobs because he was like, I can do this, right? And not understanding the deficits and kind of putting other people in danger as well. And thankfully, everything was okay. We convinced him it's time to retire, right? Um, but all of that, and I think this is something that a lot of people have to think about, all of that created um, this uh, internal isolation in him because he knew things were not right and he was continuing to try to prove to himself that he could do things. And when it wouldn't work out the way he wanted, there was embarrassment. So there's the psychological toll of that. So at the beginning of his journey, he's very embarrassed and very down on himself, like a lot of people get. Especially when they're told there's nothing that's gonna improve, and you just gotta kind of wait it out. And of course, he's got his sister in the back of his mind. He's got his dad. So he's got family history. Um, but what was exciting is, especially when we change, like when we started really changing the diet, that's when he started reporting he's getting more energy, he's more clear, he can understand things better, he can read again, just a lot of the same things that Steve Newport was reporting. But the coolest thing was confidence was coming back. So confidence in himself and the willingness to joke around and the willingness um, to stop being at the periphery of the room and start inserting himself and asserting himself back in. My dad was a big jokester, a big prankster, so he was always very serious and tough, and then he could flip a switch and just be a prankster and just um, make you laugh in stitches. And so like that personality, came back, and I think the coolest thing was this was right before COVID, the storm that COVID was came. It was December of of was it 2019 at that point. And so he wasn't driving. He was never like medic. We never like took his license away or anything like that. But he just didn't want to drive, and we didn't really want him to drive. And at the time, I was like 30 minutes away, and he calls me up, and he's like, "Hey, I'm driving to the mall right now. I'm gonna go pick up my watch at this store." And I'm panicking. I'm like, "Bah, dude, what? No, go back home. Like, come on. Like stay safe." And he's like, "No, I feel great. I'm gonna do this." And I'm talking him on the phone, and he's on the phone while driving, which is just like nuts. But I'm just talking him through the and he did exactly what he said he was gonna do. And he came back home and he had the watch and he was so proud of himself. And that was like, that was just a tremendous testimony to what the body's capable of when you can provide it what it needs. So that was cool. That hopefully that paints a picture.
That paints an amazing picture. And I hope moments like that make it into the conversation when this does become frontline, so that when you're telling somebody like, hey, option B is a whole shit ton of work that you've got to do.
Yeah.
Here's what some people has happened. Here's a few things that have happened for other people. Here's some case studies. Now you can decide, do you want to do the work or not? That's amazing. I love that story. Thank you for sharing that experience.